Hi, and welcome to Open, the show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world to you. I'm Kibin Alleyne, and today we'll update you on what's happening in and around our borough. Coming up, in hopes of improving access to health care in the Bronx, some organizations shared ideas that they hope will do just that. We speak with a member for Graham Windham and a member for BCHN to learn more. Then, Digo No Mas is a movement that focuses on making sexual abuse cases visible. We are joined by the founder of the movement to learn more about her efforts. After that, we take a look back at an interview with an editor for WalletHub to discuss the report about states where employers are struggling the most in hiring. And finally, the Good Shepherd Services B.R.A.G program works with young people, local residents, and community-based organizations to promote safer streets. The Senior Vice President of Good Shepherd Services speaks more about their mission to support the youth of NYC. So stay tuned. All this and much more is headed your way because we're now officially open. Hello everyone, I'm Kibin Alleyne, and today is Tuesday, April 9th. You are now watching Open, a program that brings the Bronx and New York City straight to you. Don't forget to stay connected with us via social media at BronxNet TV. The Center for an Urban Future published a report titled 50 Ideas for a Stronger Bronx, which highlighted health as a major concern in the borough. Senior Director of Community Leadership Development at Graham Windham, Dr. Emily Lopez, and Board of Directors President for Bronx Community Health Network, Sandra Piggee, joins me to discuss their ideas on prioritizing health in the Bronx. Thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. Now, when talking about the Bronx, there's so much that goes into it, especially when we're discussing health. Can you just talk a little bit more about the background and possibly a little bit about the historical context for why the Bronx remains the unhealthiest borough in New York?
I'm gonna let you go first.
So I'll speak more about the current history with regards to the pandemic. And I think the pandemic highlighted for the rest of the world what challenges were happening. Within the Bronx, some of the highest numbers we realized was the Bronx was one of the boroughs of essential workers. And that demonstrated and shared lack of food scarcity. There was also housing and rent increases. We were also talking about
Well, I actually want to talk a little bit more because throughout my journey, just as a reporter and just learning about it, I understand that the Bronx, is one of the unhealthiest boroughs. What are some health conditions that disproportionately affect Bronx residents? And that could be from, anything. Could you just tell us, what you've noticed in your work affects Bronx residents the most?
Right. So part of the challenges that the Bronx faces, I guess what I want to really focus on is also the assets, not just the deficits. But some of the challenges, health challenges, are mental health is disproportionate. We also have asthma. And working with the families that we have, I would say some of the things that we've actually dealt directly with is cancer. So we have, in a very short time, we've lost 2 women to breast cancer. And this is in the area of Hunts Point and Longwood in the Bronx.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, Sandra, can you tell us a little bit more about BCHN and the work that you do to address the problem of, health disparities in the Bronx?
Well, BCHN is an entity that's been around for 25 years. BCHN has brought $200 million into the Bronx over the last 25 years. Our focus and our mission is to treat the patients that we receive and that come into our facilities as a whole person. We start with whatever the patient presents, but we look at them as an entity, a whole thing. At that point, you want to know what's your health conditions, what's your mental health conditions, what's your physical, what's your socioeconomic. All of these play a part in what makes a person ill. Now, if you ask about the history of why the Bronx is in this predicament, it is basically because of the systems that had put people in the Bronx in this position and don't allow for them to upgrade themselves. When you have systems that are strictly designed for the 1% on the top and the bottom, as that pyramid is shaped, this is what you get. You get health disparities. You get people with diabetes. You get people, because we live in food deserts and they don't get a chance to buy the proper foods because there are no grocery stores or greengrocers in those areas. And the zoning and the prohibit that because the system wasn't designed for the poor. It's only designed for that 1% on the top of the pyramid. So now this is the causation of where we are today. But our agency is in the position now of helping to resolve some of those issues.
Now, I definitely want to take a moment to highlight one of the ideas that you had, and this was using zoning tools. Can you just explain what are zoning tools and how can they encourage new developments in the Bronx that can help address this issue?
Okay. When you have some areas that are being rezoned for these large mega buildings that are going up, when the community should be involved in asking, okay, you're going to put this building up. You say it's affordable care, it's going to be a mixed unit development. Now, what does this do for the community? How does this help the community? The community has to say, well, hey, if you're going to put this building here, we need a clinic in it. We need a school in it. We need childcare in it. We need groceries, a green grocer, grocery stores that actually fit the culture of the community that you place it in. One thing you don't ask about is culturally, what are the foods that the people eat? Oh, you say, oh, they're unhealthy. No, they're not. You have to teach them how to prepare them in a more healthy fashion. So in my clinic, that's what we're going to do. We have health aid education. We have community workers that go out and do educational on a monthly basis. They give seminars, webinars.
We're definitely going to take a moment to talk a little bit more about the resources that you provide. But before we get into that, Dr. Lopez, can you just tell us a little bit more about your effort to boost resources for mental health, especially for those who are parents and guardians?
So we have the Family Enrichment Center, and it is started off as an initiative. We were the first to open in the Bronx, and we were the first to open citywide in New York City. So we have 27 centers that are going to be officially, or 29 centers that are officially open as of July 1. And so part of our efforts is to really organize and support the parents, the individuals of Hunts Point and Longwood, and now throughout New York City. And so those efforts are really to look at social isolation and support families in their efforts. New York City is pretty isolated. For as dense as we are, we're pretty isolated. And so what the Family Enrichment Center offers is a place where you don't have to fill out an application, you don't have to tell us what it is that you want to do at the center until you're ready. So when you come in, it is really for us to work with you and co-create something that is completely different. So one of the things that we created that was extremely different was the business continuum. So we were charged with creating something new, and the community members said, you know what, we don't want another GED program, we want to create our own businesses. So we've been starting a small business initiative called the Business Continuum, and they get micro grants for $200 when they finish those efforts. And so this is an opportunity for economic growth in our neighborhoods. So that's a focus on the adults, right? Because it's intergenerational income growth that we are looking at, and mental health. So all of it is combined. We can't work on one without the other.
Now, I want to expand on something that you mentioned, and you mentioned the term multi-generational. You know, what are the benefits that this could have on a generation of children, especially, you know, in the past, mental health wasn't prioritized as it is now, or what we're attempting to do now. So, you know, what effect could this have on children?
So I will share with you that we have a small effort that we after each session that we continue to do, after each session, the family, the adults complete, they get a certificate, and we have a celebration. And in getting those certificates, the parents feel really good about it. We have crying going on, their children seeing them complete and accomplish, getting their micro grant, starting their business. This is a big effort for us because we can see the children extremely proud of their parents and their parents proud of themselves. So that work is really important.
Now, as you both strive for health in the Bronx, but in different ways, I feel that there are some overlapping when it comes to just physical health and mental health. What are some ways these can affect both areas? So what are some ways your physical health could affect your mental health and vice versa?
They go together. You have a person that's depressed. You want to know why. And what is it causing? It'll cause a lot, depression will cause a lot of things. You stop eating. So now your nutrition is health. Everything is, we tend to look at the body and the person as this does this and this doesn't. It doesn't happen. The person is whole. So you gotta treat him or her as a whole person. You can't departmentalize. You gotta know that this person gets 3 meals a day so that you can treat his mental health. If you give a person a pill and say, take this pill 3 times a day after every meal, did you ask that person, do they eat 3 meals a day? That is crucially important. You take a mother with an infant, she comes in, she's getting her WIC, her paper, but you say, do you know where to go to get all of the healthy foods for you and your baby? We can't isolate anything. Everything has to be directed towards the individual as a person, not as an entity or a means of extracting some sort of monetary gain because this person came into your facility and you can bill for the services that you're going to provide. No, you look at that person and you say, that's a human being. I need to treat that person with kindness and dignity.
Right.
You know.
And doctor, can you just also chime in on that, just with your experience, how they both affect each other?
I am totally with not compartmentalizing anything. Yeah. And one of the things that we tend to compartmentalize is our families, right? So you have youth work, and there's rarely anything for the adults to do, right? So anything in terms of a social environment, you have to pay for. You can't even sit anywhere unless you're buying something. And so this is a place where you can actually socialize, connect with other people, find a support network. And so that support network, you can also find similar stories. I am having challenges with my teenager. You're not the only one. There are other people in that center. we're caregivers of our family members. So you're actually in that center talking to other people, sharing those experiences and not feeling alone on it. So that is an opportunity for growth. And that is an opportunity for a connection within your community, a deeper connection than just your neighbor.
Well, I want to thank you both so much for joining us and having this very important discussion. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Don't go away. We'll be back with more Open after this.
I remember when the Bronx did not really have a media outlet properly representing the people of the Bronx.
BronxNet provides for the community by being a community where people can be empowered to share their voices.
We are in a really great place technologically. We've got all the resources that we need to be effective.
Whether it's through cameras, storytelling, editing, we have provided those services for 30 years.
BronxNet's mission is to be a voice for the community.
To educate, to inform, and to inspire.
And you can be a part of it. We've built studios for you.
Welcome back. Yo Digo No Mas, or I Say No More, is a movement founded by Maria Trusa to empower survivors of sexual assault. The movement seeks to bring an end to what Trusa calls the silent pandemic that affects millions of children, women, and men globally. Today, Maria Trusa joins me to discuss her journey with the movement and its efforts to empower survivors. Maria, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me here.
Now, as I mentioned, the movement is Yo Digo No Mas, or I Say No More. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that movement?
The movement became a movement when I wrote my own story of sexual abuse. I'm a survivor of sexual abuse at the age of 9 in the Dominican Republic. It wasn't easy for me to share my story, and it was a story that for 47 years I kept as a secret for our family. What happened to me in the Dominican Republic was well known because I came from a very small town, and I was brutally raped by someone that my father gave me to. I decided to write the book because one of my kids actually asked me to do it. I've had a very successful life. I have been able to go from the ashes and rebuild an amazing life. And I wrote the book. It came out, I Say No More. It's the same name as the movement, Yo Digo No Mas. And I started doing public speaking engagement, and then I realized that this is not just my story, that there are millions of children that have been sexually abused, that are being sexually abused, and I decided to say no more.
Now, as you mentioned, there's millions of people who are affected by this, but you describe the issue of sexual assault as a silent pandemic. Can you just tell us a little bit more about, why you view it as a silent pandemic, and just where that mindset was when you came up with this term?
Yes. So over 93% of the abuse that gets reported, and it is estimated that only 30% of the abuse gets reported, out of the every 9 minutes, a child is sexually abused in the United States. These are statistics that are heartbreaking because there is that other 70% that is not being reported. So the silent is what feeds the pandemic. And the silent exists because over 93% the monster is in the house. So it could be your dad, it could be your grandfather, your uncle, the stepdad. I hear stories over the past 4 years of having this movement that, to me, there is a major urgency in addressing this. And the thing that makes it very, very difficult is the fact that the monster is in the house. So it's a family member, and we don't want to accept it. I mean, there are children that are telling their mom, I'm being abused by my dad, and the mom is being supported by the dad. The dynamic is extremely complex, so the silent feeds this pandemic.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, as we mentioned, it's affecting millions of people, especially, children and women. And of course, there are some men who are also affected by this. But the organization highlights how this type of violence uniquely affects migrants or undocumented people in America. Can you tell us a little bit more about that finding?
The underserved community, it's undeserved, right? And we get affected. I mean, I consider myself an underserved community. When I came here, I am not underserved now. I actually serve the underserved community. But there is less education. That is why it's so important that we educate. One of my dreams, and I'm really working diligently on bringing a curriculum to the school district, because the school could start teaching the children how to protect themselves, and having the conversation in a very methodical, psychological way could start at the beginning of the school year. Unfortunately, the immigrant community have less resources. They have less education. And there's also, even where they live, there is people that sleep in the same bed with children. And the social norms that they bring from our country, like in the Dominican Republic, I mean, the children should not be sitting on the laps of the adults. No child. A child needs to be heard. We have the tendency of having almost like a dictatorship of parenting, and that comes from social norms that were given to us, especially for the immigrant community.
Now, I really want to highlight something you mentioned, and it was having these types of conversations in schools. Now, I know whenever we talk about consent, especially with young children, a lot of people have differing opinions, but I understand that you have a similar stance in regards to bringing it to the schools with the parenting curriculum. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So the curriculum will be involving the teachers, the students, there will be social workers, and the parents. My goal and wish is to start teaching parents as soon as the woman gets pregnant. Let's start talking on how to protect your child, how to speak with your child about sexual abuse. Most parents that I talk to, they don't even know how to start the conversation. This is why with the movement, we focus a lot on education. We have a conference that is happening on the 13th of this month, which is the month that is dedicated to bringing the awareness of sexual assault. And during that conference, there's going to be workshops in teaching parents how to start the conversation. So with the school, this is where the opportunity is. And there are so many cases that I know that if those children would be, if we would be having the conversation in the school, those children will come out and feel safe to speak.
And how does your organization educate survivors as well as allies? Because I think that is also very important.
I am collaborating, and I'm very proud of this collaboration, with an organization called RAIN. RAIN has been an organization over 30 years, and most people don't even know about it. One of the things that I've become is I call myself the voice for the voiceless. So I'm going to speak. I do a lot of speaking engagements because this pandemic needs to be brought out. And RAIN has a lot of education. So when people go into the website for yodigonomas.com, They're able to go through to a link that brings them to RAIN. It's in Spanish and English. And even in our website, we have a parenting guide. So the education is a big piece. But breaking the silence is actually the most difficult and the most important piece, because that silence, again, as I said at the beginning, feeds the pandemic.
Now, you're doing such an amazing job at just like bringing awareness. And I also want to highlight that there's a talk show, hashtag Digo no Mas. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, the creation of that and how it's continuing your effort to break the silence?
Thank you so much for bringing that up, because for me, that talk show, I'm extremely proud of that talk show. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm not a journalist. I own a medical center and an urgent care, and I serve the underserved community in my medical center. And to me, that was the mission that I've had. But when I realized that this mission was given to me by God, because I truly believe it, I decided to take on and be able to actually speak fluent in Spanish, but in a professional level. And I hired a speech coach for 2 years. 2 years. Every week I worked on my speaking. And I decided to bring this talk show because I said, it's not just my story, there's millions of stories. So I would ask people that would be ready to tell their story without filtering it, because we filter it and then we're hiding. I don't want the hiding anymore. So we have over 30 interviews, over 500,000 views on that, on the talk show. And I had the privilege of interviewing Mayor Mike Spano of Yonkers, who is a survivor at the age of 12. And he gave me his story. And he also joined the movement, Yo Digo No Mas. And this is our third year on April 27th that we are walking. We closed the streets of Yonkers to walk against sexual abuse of children. So the voice, it's getting really strong. And I'm inviting everyone that is listening to this. We need to unite, because it's going to take an army to be able to break the chains of sexual abuse. It's going to take an army. So we need a lot of soldiers in this army.
Now, what methods could we use as a society, because it's everyone's responsibility to protect our children and others, what can we use as a society to help prevent this type of violence?
We need to educate on the signs of, first, educate to prevent. So education is key. We need to start speaking about it, because the speaking, like I said, just keeps it. It's very uncomfortable. Everybody says to me, it's very uncomfortable to talk about this subject. When I started speaking and doing videos, even my own media team would say, oh, you shouldn't, you shouldn't say I was brutally raped at the age of 9. I was. I don't want to be statistic. We have been numbed by statistics. We need to hear the story so that we can bring the pain to the people that are watching. Pain leads to change. Until people feel the pain, we're not going to make the change that needs to be made. So it is, this work is so urgent. And the thing that I would urge people is to realize that there is an urgency, because, talking about mental health, that what happens to a child that is sexually abused, when you lose your innocence, you lose the ability to create. You lost the most precious gift that you were giving, which is the gift of being innocent. The innocence. When that happens to you, your life is 10 times worse. To recover, most people don't recover. I've been speaking in front of younger children. One of the conference, the keynote speaker is a 14-year-old survivor. And I speak to children, I speak to adults, 80 years old. I will never forget this woman saying to me, how do I forgive? I live to forgive. I forgive to live. I forgive to live. Because I realized, even speaking with a woman, 80 years old, you could see the pain. She was sexually abused by her dad. And even at 80, she is suffering. The suffering needs to stop.
Now, how can people support your organization in this movement? I think it's a powerful movement, and I agree with 100% of everything you're saying. So what can people do to further support this movement?
That's the question that is a gold question, because I can tell you that I've invested $1 million of my own money for 4 years because I see the urgency. And there are times where I feel, why is it that people do not see this as an urgent matter? We need funding. We need people. I have a $10 campaign on the website that nobody really, and we promote this. $10 a month can help us create education material, can help us do all of these walks. Right. We need funding, but in addition to that, we need people to show up. Right. Like the day of the walk, we want thousands of people to be walking with us. The first walk, we had over 1,000 people.
That's amazing.
Yes. So we need people to continue to spread the word and go into the website and educate yourself at least.
Well, Maria, I want to thank you so much for joining us, sharing your story, and just talking about, this topic in depth. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
To learn more about the Yo Digo No Mas movement, please go to the website on your screen below or follow them on Instagram at Yo Digo No Mas. Stay tuned. We have more open for you right after this.
Congratulations to BronxNet on its 30th anniversary. And I'm blessed that I was here shortly after the beginning of BronxNet. At that time, I took the field and studio classes, and I spent a lot of time helping other people have shows before I put my toe in the water and decided to have a show for myself. For those of you who are familiar with the Blackwash Televised Art Gallery, that was my first show on my own. And now I am pumping up La Finca del Sur, doing Eating Healthy with La Finca del Sur on BronxNet's Channel 70. And I appreciate everyone watching.
Welcome back. To see where employers are struggling the most in hiring, WalletHub compared the 50 states and the District of Columbia based on the rate of job openings for the month of February and the last 12 months prior. We got a chance to sit down with Christie Matherne, who's an editor for WalletHub, who helped explain this report. Let's take a look. Now, can you tell us a little bit more about WalletHub and its overall mission?
Sure. So WalletHub is a personal finance company that offers a wide range of services and tools to empower consumers, including free credit scores that are updated daily. We have powerful comparison tools for various financial products, 24/7 credit monitoring, debt payoff tools, you name it. And we also do a lot of studies on trends in finance and consumer behavior, such as this one.
Exactly. So I want to talk about that. Before we get into the challenges, though, can you talk about the improvements we're seeing in the labor market?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. The labor market is showing signs of improvement, and there's a few notable indicators for this. For instance, the national labor force participation rate is nearing pre-pandemic levels. It's currently at 62.5% as of January. Additionally, the unemployment rate has dropped to just 3.7%, and that shows increased job opportunities and a growing demand for labor. Employees are also showing a greater reluctance to leave their current jobs, And this gives stability within companies because it allows them to focus on filling new roles rather than constantly backfilling due to turnover.
Now, you just mentioned that employees are becoming less likely to leave their employers. What positive impact could this have on the overall job market?
Well, definitely. To put it simply, when people are less likely to leave their jobs, it reduces turnover rates and it allows companies to focus more on filling new positions and fostering stability within their workforce rather than constantly having to search, hire, and train people to fill roles.
Now, this leads to my next question. For some time, there has been this misconception that people don't want to work, and it's been a narrative that we've been hearing a lot, especially since the pandemic. Can you just talk a little bit more about where this stemmed from? And, do people still kind of have this idea about, people just not wanting to work these days?
This misconception likely stemmed from shifts in workforce preferences and also accelerated retirements during the pandemic. And I think the pandemic shifted something in a lot of people, to be honest. However, the labor market is improving by the numbers, as we said earlier. I think it's clear from a 3.7% unemployment rate that people do want to work. The rate of quitting has decreased from its 2021 high. So people want to keep their jobs more than they ever did before. And despite these positive trends, many businesses still face labor shortages, particularly in certain states. I think the attitude maybe is still out there that people don't want to work, but I don't think the numbers show that.
Now, can you tell us more about your study and the most recent report on employers and the hiring process?
Sure. So we use data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and we analyze job opening rates for both the latest month and the past 12 months. So the report highlights states with the most pronounced hiring difficulties.
Now, can you talk a little bit about, what were some of the major findings in this report?
The main findings, we highlighted the states with the most significant struggles in hiring as indicated by job openings rates for both the latest month and the past 12 months. And states where employers are struggling the most include West Virginia, South Carolina, Alaska, Colorado, and Minnesota. And these states all had the highest rates of job openings in the U.S.
Now, can you explain why we may actually be seeing some of these states struggling to kind of fill these spots?
Well, one of the economics experts we spoke to for this study, James Bailey, pointed out something notable here. There are more job openings in the U.S. than there are unemployed people. The latest data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics job openings and labor turnover study shows that there are 1.4 job openings for every unemployed person. But the labor shortage problem could also be due to other factors, including recovery of job growth post-pandemic. We're still not quite to where we were. So there's also accelerated retirement rates among baby boomers and industry-specific talent shortages, particularly in technology and healthcare.
Now, just to clarify, is it that they can't find people to fill these jobs, or possibly could it be that maybe the jobs are open, but there aren't enough people qualified for them? Do you have any insight on and maybe that aspect why they're struggling to hire people in some of these positions?
Well, I think that it's possible that it's both of those things and all of those things. And I think also additionally shifting attitudes toward work, including a preference for non-traditional roles and possibly hybrid work from home preferences as well can contribute to this too.
I'm so glad that you actually brought up work from home, because I think stemming from the pandemic, that was probably the main thing that kind of changed the workforce. I think honestly for the entire future, people are going to either want to work from home or, do hybrid. Can you just explain the impact that has had on the workforce in America?
Well, I think that people wanting to work more from home can definitely affect hiring struggles. I keep hearing personally about offices trying to get their employees back to the office. and they're getting a lot of pushback, I think, from people who have been working from home for a couple of years, and that makes sense to me when you get used to something so much, and I think a lot of people are more productive at home too.
Right. Thank you so much for kind of like touching on that, because I think that it is changing the way we see just work in the future. And it could have also like a possible like large impact, because so many people have gotten used to working from home or taking care of the kids and working. So thank you so much for talking about that. Now, the job opening rates in the last 12 months for New York is 4.43%. Can you explain, what this number means for some of us who may not understand that, and how will it affect employment rates in New York City?
So this means that over the past year, there have been, on average, 4.43% of job openings relative to the total number of jobs in the state. So this rate suggests kind of a moderate demand for labor. However, it may not significantly affect employment rates in New York City, as the rate is relatively stable between now and the past year. Now it's 4.6%. So that's not necessarily indicative of a major surge or a major decline in job opportunities. And New York ranks 47th in our study, by the way. So it's doing pretty well.
Now, for a lot of these numbers, they were looked at, as you mentioned earlier, like in January, so we're really early. How do you think this will change, or how do you foresee this changing? Let's say December 2024, January 2025.
Well, that's hard to say. These things do move kind of slow. If there's any indicator between the past 12 months and now, there's not a ton of variation. So these numbers are moving slow, like I said. I think we're still not out of the woods on labor shortages. And I think we're going to see a little more struggle in hiring until the end of the year, at least.
Now, this is just, one of the things that WalletHub does. Can you tell us a little bit more about, what the organization does, and possibly like maybe some other studies that they have looked into?
Sure. Well, we also, in addition to having comparison tools for different financial products, we cover loans, car insurance, credit cards, and everything a consumer would need to be kind of financially savvy. And we also do credit monitoring. We have debt payoff tools like calculators. If you're planning to get a mortgage anytime soon, we have a mortgage calculator that you can kind of see where you're going to save the most money with your rate. And with our studies, we put out a ton of studies, especially recently. We, in relation to the study that we're talking about, we also have a study about states where unemployment claims are increasing the most. We have changes in unemployment rate by state, best and worst states for jobs, best cities for jobs, and we also have a lot of things about the economy in general.
All right, well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and having this discussion.
Thank you so much for having us on.
To find out more about WalletHub and their report, please go to their website at www.wallethub.com. We'd like to take this time to thank not only Christie Matherne, but also the team at WalletHub for working with us and helping us inform our viewers about their studies. We'll be back with more Open right after this.
The ability to have my show during this time is helpful because I can stay connected with my friends, still interview people, and share my content.
Hey everyone, it's your girl Kat from the Kitty Rose Lifestyle, also from The Next Chapter, where we discuss shades of gray every week right here at BronxNet, Saturdays at 11 p.m. Wow, 30 years. 30 years of BronxNet public access television. I'm a girl from Brooklyn and came to the Bronx 25 years ago, started my journey on BronxNet on public access television in 2016, and BronxNet is where I got my start. BronxNet, I feel like, is a home away from home. They support all of my endeavors, and I wouldn't have been able to be on any of the other channels if it wasn't for the fundamentals that I learned right here at my start here at BronxNet. So I am so appreciative. My son says I should stop telling people I'm from Brooklyn because I've been here now, Bronx Strong, for 22 years. So I'm so grateful, and I wish you much success in 30 years, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30 more. Because public access is necessary so that people like myself can have a voice. Yes, BronxNet. It's your girl Kat from Kitty Rose. Check me out every Saturday at 11 p.m. right here, Channel 68, The Next Chapter, where we discuss shades of gray. Mwah.
Welcome back. Bronx Rises Against Gun Violence aims to address the issue of gun violence and crime by supporting youth in high-risk communities. B.R.A.G provides resources and opportunities to young people that allow them to see past neighborhood gun violence and envision a better future for themselves. Senior Vice President for Good Shepherd Services, David Caba, joins me to discuss their efforts. David, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, how did B.R.A.G begin under Good Shepherd Services?
So in 2014, the city decided to deploy the Cure Violence model here in New York City. Discretionary funds were offered to community-based organizations. Good Shepherd Services, at Good Shepherd, we have a slogan called "We See What Can Be." And when they saw this initiative to reduce gun violence in the communities that we serve, they couldn't wait to take a chance at doing that in our communities. So we see what can be, we see peace, we see safety, we see prosperity in our communities. At that point in time, I was hired and recruited to build B.R.A.G from the ground up.
Now, the program works with several different organizations and community residents, which is always a plus when we're doing this type of work. Can you talk about the importance of some of these partnerships?
It's critical to have these partnerships. It can't just be B.R.A.G alone, Good Shepherd alone, fighting gun violence and other forms of violence in our communities. We need everyone. We need the residents, we need the Business Improvement District, we need faith-based, the other community-based organizations, our elected officials, law enforcement. Everyone plays a role, in particular the families and youth that we serve.
Now, as you mentioned, there's a focus on youth. Why did you want to prioritize this demographic, especially when we're talking about gun violence?
When you study this issue, the data basically suggests that individuals who are between the ages of 16 to 25-year-old are the most engaged in these high-risk activities. As a result, our program is designed for them to provide all the resources necessary for them to understand how to deal with conflict in a peaceful way.
Now, as someone who's, been doing this work, how have you seen gun violence affect communities like the Bronx?
It affects all sectors. Obviously, when someone gets shot, whether it's an infant, a youth, an elder, it has ripple effects. It could be the provider of the family, it could be the child of a family, it could be an elder. These have serious mental health issues when it comes to our communities and the impact that it has. It ranges in different areas. It can affect education, it could affect housing. It's critical that we attack this problem on a multi-pronged basis.
And I also want to add, just as somebody who's from the Bronx and lived in New York City my entire life, it also affects people who maybe have nothing to do with gun violence. It really does affect the person who is holding the gun, and it changes the trajectory of their life, but it also affects maybe somebody who is also trying to be on the right path. So I think it's so amazing that your organization is really doing the work to address this issue. Now, I want to mention Cure Violence. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how it's an evidence-based anti-violence model?
Absolutely. The Cure Violence model was created in Chicago. It is a public health approach. In other words, violence behaves like a contagion. It spreads, it clusters, and you get infected. So the epidemiologist, Dr. Gary Sluggan, who created it, he looked at it from that point of view, realized that a cure was necessary, and the Cure Violence model was born. In essence, the Cure are the credible messengers to deploy that model in the community most impacted by gun violence. So it's designed to do three things. One is to detect and interrupt conflicts on the spot. We're talking about late at night, not usually when you're sleeping probably, and our teams are out there doing this work on a night in, night out basis. We do dozens of interruptions and mediations, de-escalations a night. Second one is to engage the youth that are involved in these high-risk activities, develop those relationships and move them in the right direction with a ton of resources. And the last one is to change the community norms. Our communities, unfortunately, when you suffer decades of gun violence and other forms of violence, you think it's normal. And so we use a massive public education campaign, both print and social media, to drive the message home that this violence is not normal and needs to stop.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, I kind of give this idea of like, people who aren't even in this, who don't deal with guns can sometimes fall victim to this. And I want to mention that because of something called retaliatory violence. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you've seen with that? And how is your organization helping those affected by this community violence?
So most of the time when gun violence takes place, the natural thought is that, these are young people who have arguments amongst each other, what they call beefs in the streets. And when one person gets injured, the other decides to retaliate, to return the favor, so to speak. But it also can mean, for example, if my child gets hurt, I'm going to be very upset at the individual that hurt my child, and I'm going to want something done. Unfortunately, sometimes this individual who's not really engaged in at-risk activities in the community will take things into their own hands. So we not only offer services to our young people that we serve, but all those affected as well.
Now, I want to talk about the leaders in B.R.A.G. The leaders have a very special connection with the community that they serve. Can you talk about the importance of having credible community members lead this mission?
It's the essence of what we do. We wouldn't be as effective as we are, and we've had a lot of success in the 10 years that we've been in the Bronx, deploying the Cure Violence model. Our credible messengers come from these very communities that we serve. They go through a very stringent vetting process, both traditional and non-traditional. Some things you'll be surprised to hear, and how we make sure that they're the right individual. They have to be suitable, not just credible. They come from these neighborhoods, probably still live there, know everyone in the neighborhood, the pastor, the bodega owner, all the young kids. The kids look up to them. They remember them when they were younger. They know the stories. Some of the stories are, not to be proud of, but it's the makeup of the credible messengers that allows that deep impact in terms of connecting with our young people.
And just to kind of expand on that, when we say credible, this is somebody who has maybe lived this life, and they know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they know what it's like to kind of maybe turn the other page and kind of like get their life back on track. Can you expand on that a little bit more, what it means to be a credible, leader in this organization?
Yeah, lived it, breathed it, exuded. Our credible messengers used to be that young person that unfortunately may have been carrying a weapon, may have been part of a violent street organization, who suffered the consequences. And those, include being brought into a trauma ER because they suffered some injuries, unfortunately lost their freedom and ended up in institutions like prison. But then they decided to turn their lives around because unfortunately we have seen many of our friends and family end up in the cemetery. And that was the final lesson. No one wants to end in that plot that the family has to go visit. So they come back and turn their lives around. There's a ton of training behind this, violence interruption, program management implementation, mental health first aid that they all go through before they can even start walking in our community and serving our community. So they're extremely impactful. They are the main ingredient behind the model that we use.
Now, can you talk about the criteria needed to join the program?
So basically, when we recruit you because we know every member in the community. We know individuals that used to be part of that lifestyle and turned things around. So credibility is at the highest. If you can't engage with the community members, then your success will probably be diminished. One of the things that we tend to do is we walk the community with the credible messenger just to see if they know where the hotspots are, if they know who the different young people are that are engaged in high-risk activity and what their connection to them is. Respect is a big deal for us, so when we're walking through that community, we're paying attention to how the community engages with this individual. Last but not least, we check social media. If you're promoting positivity, that's a box that's checked, that we know that you're in the right direction. Last is a hiring panel made of community members. So the interview involves, for example, you, Kibin, if you're a credible messenger, you'll be sitting in front of community members who remember when you were young, maybe causing them distress. And so now they get a chance to question you and see that you really turned your life around.
That's amazing. I love to hear that it really is a community effort. I think that's amazing, and it gives those people a chance to show that their community, that they've changed. So I think that's amazing. Now, because of the nature of the program, is outreach a challenge? And if so, how do you ever overcome those challenges?
It is a challenge, but we eat, sleep, and breathe. This is what we do. We were doing this before there was any funding associated to this. Many of us grew up in our neighborhoods and encountered violence and stepped in because we knew that peace was the way to resolve issues. Someone being hurt doesn't resolve anything. All it does is foster that contagion that I talked about, which is violence that spreads in clusters and people get infected. So when it comes to outreach, we do it in a variety of ways. When we canvass, and we're talking about like 5 to 6 hours every night that we're canvassing up and down the hottest part of a precinct, for example, we're dishing out hundreds and hundreds of public education materials. Our posters are in the bodegas, in the liquor store, in the grocery store, in the supermarket. Our information, we have community events where we do rallies and marches. In fact, our peace barbecues are famous in the summer. Every third Saturday in June, July, and August, we have the B.R.A.G Peace Barbecues in the different parts of the Bronx that we're in, where we have a major celebration about the peace and safety that we've achieved in our communities.
What are some ways people can, and by people I mean maybe that could be local leaders or just other community residents, what are some ways people can help support this mission?
Whenever we do have events, particularly, for example, this evening we have a shooting response to the 2-year-old boy that was injured. So we need everyone to come out and support us. We need our elected leaders, we need community-based organizations, families, friends, anyone that has suffered this type of tragedy in their lifestyles, because the community needs to hear that this is not normal. We will not stand for that. You can also come visit us at our various locations. You can find us on Instagram at @BRAG_GSS. If you're a young person hearing this right now, please give us a call. We have a variety of resources for you, a boxing studio, a music recording studio. Please reach out to us.
And, I just want to add that from what I'm hearing so far, it sounds like it is very much a judgment-free zone, and it gives people the chance to kind of show their community that they've changed and that they want to, make it a peaceful community. So I love just everything that I've heard so far and what the community is doing, and especially something that we need here in the Bronx. So I want to thank you so much for joining us and, just sharing a little bit about what your community is doing to help strengthen the Bronx.
Well, we're one with our community, so they know who we are. We still live there. I live in one of the precincts that we operate in, and so we're here to stay, and we look to expand.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
To learn more about the Good Shepherd Services program, B.R.A.G, please go to the website on the screen below. We've come to the end of our show today. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us and you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the Recable cast at 5 and 10 p.m. on Optimum Channel 67 and Verizon Fios Channel 33, or watch anytime on the web at BronxNet.org. You can catch a brand new episode of Open with Darren Hymie on Wednesday and with Rena Valentine on Friday. I'm Kibin Alleyne, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.